Hello everyone, I am Luxin, and this is Xenogears, an epic JRPG released by Squaresoft in 1998 for the original PlayStation, and the direct predecessor to the Xenoblade Chronicles series we all know and love. I'm playing through this game for my very first time currently, and recording it so I can make the same kind of videos for Xenogears as I do for the Blade games. And yes, don't worry, Xenosaga's coming next. Since a lot of my viewers are people who started with the Blade games, and more specifically Xenoblade 2, I figured it would be a good idea to catch everyone up, to get everyone up to speed in preparation for Xenogears videos, which, trust me, if this is the first time you've heard of the game, you're gonna want to stick around for those, because they have a lot of important stuff and connections to the Xenoblade series, so you should definitely keep an eye on them. And so, here we are. I'm basically going to narrate my way through the plot of Xenogears in a bit more detail than you'd see from the entire plot in 40 minutes or the entire plot in an hour kind of video, because you know the kind of videos I make. Those gloss over way too many things, and trust me, a lot of those have to leave entire party members in the dust because this game has such a long, deep, and complex story. And so, here we are. If you saw the video on Sunday, this is going to contain 10 minutes directly taken from that. Basically, I saw a lot of the same feedback coming from the majority of people who are giving it, so I figured I'd give you exactly what you wanted, a longer form video. So this is going to be all the plot covered in that one, plus a bunch of additional stuff, so definitely watch this one if you've seen the previous one, and you might want to even watch the reused part, because I now have this nifty party graphic that will show exactly who and what is playable at any given time in the game, which, trust me, you might need to understand things because the party is a massive revolving door for, like, the first third of the game. It is also worth noting that I will be using the names directly as written in the English version of the game itself. A lot of these names are mistranslations or misconstruations of what the original Japanese name was intending, and a lot of fan works and alternative material may give different spellings and pronunciations to different characters' names. But I will be sticking with what the game says for consistency with what was in my own playthrough and my own experience. There are quite a few typos and localization mistakes in the English script of the game, but I can't really fault the localization team for once, because it was literally one man on a time crunch, and given the situation, I think he did a pretty commendable job. I'm also going to intersperse a few anecdotes about my own playthrough and maybe some small tips for new players along the way, stuff that was useful for my own playthrough, but I think I've talked long enough. Let's get into the game. Upon starting a new file, or just leaving the title screen idle for long enough, we're met with mysterious text. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. A massive spaceship is lighting up with danger signs. The technobabble that the bridge officer spouts seems to be genetics related. An attempt to fix the issue by the captain fails, and it seems like something is taking over the ship, rerouting its autopilot to head towards the main planet. A call to the engine room falls on dead ears, and the phrase "Ye shall be as gods" is spammed on the bridge monitors. The captain orders an evacuation, but the ship's own weapons turn on the escape shuttles and destroy them. Pulling out a picture of his wife and daughter, the latter of whom bears a striking resemblance to the woman on the box art of the game, he resolves himself and self-destructs the ship, which goes crashing to a nearby planet, where a blue-haired woman rises from the wreckage beside the ocean. This will not be explained for a very, very long time. Next, though, in an opening lore dump that would bring any Fire Emblem fan to tears, we're introduced to this game's world. On Ignis, the largest continent on this planet, a war between the Kislev Empire to the north and the Kingdom of Ave to the south has been raging for so long that nobody even remembers the cause. The fighting was recently escalated due to both sides making use of artifacts from ancient civilizations, which were repaired by the church-like cultural preservation institution known as Ethos. Instead of ground troops, fighting was now waged between humanoid mechs known as Gears. Kislev had access to better artifacts, which gave them the upper hand, but a mysterious new force known as Gebler appeared and allied with Ave, evening the odds and eventually allowing them to take more territory for themselves. The story proper opens in the small Ave village of Lahan, right near the Kislev border. The village is on fire and under attack as a man named Fei Fong Wong tries to fight off attacking gears in his own. He has a small bit of success, but is clearly winded as another man named Citan tells him not to fight here. The scene fades away to reveal that it was just a painting Fei is working on. From here, you can then talk to some NPCs to get even more exposition. Fei was brought to the village with no memories 3 years ago by a mysterious masked man who placed him in the care of the village chief. He was accepted by the community and now teaches martial arts to the children. Fei's closest friends, Timothy and Alice, are getting married tomorrow, and there's a big discussion going on in his house about the wedding. Everyone is excited for it except for Alice's younger brother Dan, who doesn't seem to like Timothy a whole lot, and very, very clearly wishes his sister was marrying Fei instead. After some terrible well puns, gambling on rock, paper, scissors, and a Chrono Trigger cameo that makes a lot of sense if you really think about it, Fei checks up on Alice, and some very, very awkward potential romantic tension ensues as she ponders a situation in which she'd be marrying Fei instead. Before he leaves, she does ask him to head up the mountain to ask the local doctor Citan Uzuki to borrow a camera for the wedding. The mountain path up to Citan's house is your introductory dungeon, and at the top, Fei finds him tinkering with a vehicle, but not before his wife Yui comes out with this fantastic line. Citan shows him an artifact that opens up into a music box, which plays a song that makes Fei feel strange. He agrees to eat dinner with the couple and their silent daughter Midori, but after leaving the shed, Citan talks to himself in a manner that implies he knows a lot more than he lets on. The music box breaks, and Citan worries if it's an omen of things to come. After dinner, Fei heads back down the mountain, and is alarmed to see giant figures flying towards the village. Citan reveals that they're Kislev gears, and the two hurry down to see what's going on. It turns out that the gears are attacking Lahan, and that while Timothy and Alice are safe, Dan is completely missing. Fei and Citan take control of the evacuation, but Fei spots a gear with a dead pilot, and upon seeing a sinister-looking boy with wild hair, is compelled to board it, to Citan's many objections. The gear interfaces with him, identifying him as a lamb, and giving the player a tutorial on mech combat. He fends off a few enemies, but is quickly surrounded as another imposing gear watches the battle unfold. Dan shows up, having stayed behind to rescue Alice's wedding dress, and Citan worries that he might awake if things keep up like this, as well as saying that Fei is bound by the dark, cruel destiny of God. Timothy comes back to save Dan, but is gunned down, seemingly at the order of the imposing gear. This causes something to snap inside Fei, as he sees images of a pendant swinging and an innocent-looking child turning into the menacing one from before. His gear lets off an incredible shockwave, and he blacks out. He comes to in the woods near a few villagers, and Dan immediately starts screaming at him, calling him a murderer. Citan reveals that the energy he released destroyed the entire village and killed most of the inhabitants, including Alice. He also suggests that he leave, as the troops are likely still after him and the remaining villagers are very, very clearly scared of him. Fei decides to head to Ave proper by way of the nearby Black Moon Forest, and with one last look at the gear, he departs. This little jaunt through the world map to get into the forest is the first time you're forced to hear it, so it's probably a good time to mention that the world map theme, Emotions, is fantastic. Partway through the forest, Fei is held up by an orange-haired woman who also looks like the one on the cover art. She initially speaks in a foreign language, but quickly switches to one he understands. She nervously holds him at gunpoint, remarking that he's not one of the Kislev soldiers after her, but that she also has orders to kill every lamb she comes in contact with. She asks Fei for directions out, but he doesn't know either, and gets pretty suicidal, commenting on how worthless he is and trying to get the woman to shoot him. She's then attacked by forest-dwelling monsters, and Fei immediately jumps into action to protect her, somehow instinctively referring to her as Elly. When the two talk over a fire and he finally gets her to open up a little, she reveals that her name is Elheim, her nickname actually being Elly. They spend the night together for safety, and Fei has a dream where a younger version of himself is chasing strange figures through a desert until Elly speaks to him. In the morning, the two set out again, and you get your first taste of multiple party members. Elly asks Fei what he meant about his life being worthless, and he explains the incident at Lahan. She flashes back to herself flying in a regiment of gears and having to make an emergency landing in the village. Fei decides to start blaming the attack on the invading gears, not his own losing control, and Elly admonishes him, calling him a coward for ignoring his role in the destruction. He agrees and starts wallowing, but Elly almost immediately seems conflicted about having said what she did, flashing back again to a hallway covered in blood, that she seemingly was the cause of. She remarks to herself that she's also a coward, but is then attacked by a literal T-Rex from nowhere. Faye hears her screams and rushes in to engage, but is obviously hopelessly outmatched, fighting a dinosaur with some special karate moves. A few turns into the battle though, Citan comes by in the machine he was fixing earlier, carrying the gear Faye had piloted before. He makes the difficult decision to get back in and utterly trounces the beast. They talk about what just happened, Citan remarking that an ordinary gear couldn't have beaten it, and also name-dropping that the name of this one is Veltal. Faye says that he hates gears and doesn't want to have that much power, but Citan tries to get him to bring Veltal along with him, if only for protection from his pursuers. They decide to camp for the night since Elly is still injured and Veltal needs repairs, and later on, after Faye falls asleep, Citan gives up on fixing the gear and talks to Elly. He reveals that he's able to speak her language and deduces that another empty gear found near the village was actually hers. She's in the military and was part of the group that attacked Lahan. He convinces her to leave before Faye wakes up, but she expresses regret that she can't apologize to him. Citan is surprised by this, saying she's an oddity among her people for actually caring about surface dwellers. The conversation continues a bit, and Elly name drops a place called Jugend before finally leaving. In the morning, Faye reveals that he heard some of the conversation, but has decided to accept blame for what happened at Lahan, and the two decide to head to the town of Dazil to figure out what's going on in the war, and to find parts for Veltal. On the way out, they spot an airship that Citan identifies as belonging to Gebler, special forces from the Sacred Empire of Solaris, and theorizes that Elly is a member. On the little world map jaunt from the forest to Dazil, if you find yourself in a desert dungeon type area, leave immediately before you get stuck. You're not supposed to be here yet, and when you do go for the story, you'll actually have a guide to follow through so you know the right path, but without that, you can easily get stuck for 45 minutes like I did if you wander around now, so if Citan is in your party, do not go here and leave the instant you arrive. Dazil is a bustling town, the center for all ruin excavation in Ave, and has an Ethos facility that Faye and Citan head to in search of gear parts. Turns out that they don't have parts for Veltal since it's a brand new military gear, and that facility only services the worker gears that are actually excavating the ruins. They discuss what to do next. Faye wants to abandon Veltal, but Citan wants to move it as far from Lahan as possible because it's very clearly a target for both sides of the conflict. Citan then rents a sand vehicle and heads out looking for wrecks of military gears to find parts, and after being warned of the danger, Faye heads out to follow him. This is when you're supposed to run into the desert dungeon thing, and this time you can actually get through it because Faye is hot on the trail of a pair of Ave gears he spots, thinking that they will lead him to where Citan went. He does lose track of them pretty quickly, but while wandering around, spots a weird metal structure with strange lights coming off of it flying above him, and soon after another unit of Ave gears follow, which he also heads on the tail of. As night falls, Citan is still nowhere to be found, and Faye is getting pretty worried, so when he spots a motorcycle division of Ave soldiers riding by, he does the only sensible thing and jumps out in front of the last guy in line, causing him to ditch, and then steals his motorcycle to head off into the night, looking for his friend because why not at this point? Cloud had a motorcycle, so the other Square RPG protagonist has to have one too. Not surprising anyone at all, this master plan of thievery does nothing but get another pair of gears on his tail, and as it looks like Faye's about to be caught, Citan shows up piloting Veltal to the best of his abilities, which are nowhere near Faye's, managing to save his life, but then basically skedaddling and letting Faye get in the gear to do what he does best. After dispatching these foes though, yet another adversary reveals itself, as standing on top of a nearby peak is the very imposing gear from the attack on Lahan, but this time its pilot is visible. A strange imposing man, cloaked entirely in black and red armor. Upon seeing him, Faye has another small vision, this one just showing off the two children again, and the armored guy introduces himself as Gruff, Seeker of Power, and the orchestrator behind the attack on Lahan, who sent the gears after the village in order to make contact with Faye and awaken a power within him. From this, we can pretty much fully extrapolate everything that was going on. Elly, full name Elheim von Houten, is a member of Gebler who happened to be flying with her gear unit near the area of the village when she was shot down by Kislev gears commanded by Gruff. This caused her to ditch nearby the village and escape into the Black Moon Forest, And in an attempt to find her, the Kislev Gears landed in Lahan and began slaughtering the entire village. This is what directly led to Faye seeing Veltal and hopping in the cockpit, and of course eventually going berserk. All of this seemingly being exactly what Gruff had planned. In this conversation though, Gruff just seems to be trying to get a bit of a read on Faye by talking to him and attempting to provoke him. He says that his basic nature seems unchanged, which suggests he knows something about Faye before he lost his memories, but also, in really typical JRPG fashion, spouts out that his and Faye's combined destiny is to destroy God. Faye, who hasn't wanted to get tangled up in any of this so far, really doesn't want to go that far, and just tries to get Gruff out of there, but the one thing he can say that does get a rise out of Faye is that he knew and killed Faye's father. This is all he's willing to divulge right now though, because he says that Faye's power is nowhere near high enough for what he needs it for, and in an attempt to make him stronger, sicks a giant fuel-sucking desert sandworm on him, which is your next boss fight. After defeating this enemy though, the temporary repairs that were made to Veltal break down, and the two are unable to fend off another attack by Ave Gears, which leads to them finally being captured and placed on an Ave transport ship. While asleep in a cell, Faye has another dream. This one of Gruff, asking to join with Faye somehow, and of a mustached man, saying that he will never let Gruff and another weird guy with pale skin and red hair have him, even if it kills him. Since when you're in prison there's not really much else to do but kill time, Faye and Citan have a bit of a chat. They discuss worries about the goings-on, Citan reaffirming that Veltal is an experimental model gear from Kislev, so it makes sense that the Ave military would want to capture it intact, and Faye expressing concern about his father. All he knows about him is that he was crying out for him when he was carried to the village 3 years ago, broken and nearly dead. And beyond that, nothing else. Citan then worries to himself if something called the Time of the Gospel is approaching, and we're then led into a very trippy dream telepathy sequence thing, where he talks with a guy called the Emperor, someone sitting on a throne, but with no visible face, only a golden helm in the shape of a skull. He confirms that yes, the time is soon approaching, and that at that time, a group called the Gazelle, which seems to include both the Emperor and Citan himself, will need to make a final prayer to break humanity from the fate that it's been locked into since its genesis. Cut to an outside view of the transport, but this time through a periscope, as a brash young sand pirate captain with an eye patch spies Veltal riding atop it and decides it's time to seize it for himself. He makes battle preparations, much to the objections of his similarly eye-patched assistant, and an old guy who will turn out to basically be Alfred Pennyworth. Citan spots their ship rising from the sand right before it opens fire on the transport, causing severe damage and it to start sinking. This leads to a small dungeon as Faye and Citan try to escape before they're buried, just barely saving Veltal from falling too with the aid of the transport's crane. They make a clean getaway, but it's quickly cut short as the eye-patched pirate captain shows up in a similarly eye-patched red pirate gear and attacks Faye on sight, mistaking him for an Ave soldier who just left all his comrades to die. This is your next boss fight as the gear Brigadier takes you on with its whips and accuracy lowering spells. Deal enough damage though, and this fight ends inconclusively, as both combatants manage to get themselves stuck in quicksand, which very quickly swallows the gears up, pilots and all, and drags them below. And that, I think, is a far better stopping point than the one I had last time, which was basically just, yeah, Faye's going out to the desert. This seems a bit more natural. I don't know if I'll be able to get to a good cliffhanger every time like this, but I do agree with you people, the 20-minute videos do seem like they'll work a bit better in the long run in terms of flow and actually getting the narrative done in time. Also, the way I scripted the second half of the video was different from the first half, so if it seems any different and you like it more or less than the original part of the video, let me know, and I'll probably use the method you people prefer more in the future. But yeah, for people who watched the original version of the video, thank you for sticking with this one for so long, and I hope you enjoyed the new stuff added here. And for those of you who just got onto this series now, I hope you stick around for the rest of this game, because I'm like a quarter of the way done, and I'm loving it already. And until next time, this is Luxin, signing off.